So we have our barn with flowers here. We're going to start with the grasses. I've already pre-mixed some things and I'll use some out of the box. I've got this woodlands kit. You're welcome to use your own. I'm choosing to make this look like a springtime scene. You can also use a golden color to give it more of that kind of straw or hay look. So I'm going along this edge here and I'm just applying a light film of water in between some of these flower stems, and they're going to be green as well, so I really don't have to go around them as much as I would if I was doing the hay. Then you wouldn't want it to be wet, those stems, and I for sure do not want the flowers to have green on them at all. So because it's already wet, the paint is starting to disperse. It makes less harsh lines around the edge. And I can come in here with the very tip of my brush and deposit some paint along that top line, kind of make the pen lines disappear for the final look. And I'm going to get this a little bit of a darker green and deposit along that top, spending a little more time on that just to get that the way I want. And you see I'm kind of just depositing some paint in lines like this because the grass would grow up in clumps and stems in that kind of way, still kind of moving. Although the stems are going up and down vertically, the ground is horizontal. So I don't do a lot of up and down stripes unless they're specific to mimic what grass would look like. In the sense of going like this with my paint, I'm going side to side, but then depositing the paint horizontally with a vertical look. So you can see I'm filling that in, and while it's still wet, I can deposit some darker color in here. I can even go and get some of this brown just to give a varying look. And now I'll clear my brush, and though you don't have to because it's green, and come in here as best you can. You can kind of navigate around some of these flowers down here in the stems. And you can always go back in and fill in later once you've just determined what is actually a stem and that's a lot of paint and what is green. So that's a lot of paint here, so I'm going to take some of that and redeposit it somewhere else. You can also clear it off on your paper towel. So that's the first round, and we can go in and add more detail across here later if we want. But we don't want to do the flowers and things yet because we're letting this dry. So now I'm actually going to come in here and do this right now so that I can have that nice and dry when I go to do the sky in a bit. Clearing my brush off. I just want to make sure that I don't have a stark white line in there where it meets my line, and I'm going to deposit some paint here, and I can add detail later. I've got a little bit of white of the paper to delineate as well. So now I'm going to work on my roof and get that done so it'll be dry enough to do the sky in a bit. And I'm going to start with this sand ridge and come in here and just cover the background as a first layer. And you can use a gray, a black, you can do a gray barn and a red roof. It's totally up to you how you'd like to design your painting. I had a little bit of green in my brush, so my palette here, so it turned out a little greener than I would want. Got these little vents here in the top I'm going to paint in. So we've got that first layer down, and then I've got some brown here, and I'm going to start kind of coming along the outside, a little inside with darker, just tapping in a little bit of color along some of those lines to start building up texture. And I also liked this gray. I've done this painting a few times, and each one is a little bit different, some more saturated than others. Doing the same thing, just kind of dappling in some texture so that when that's dry, I can add the lines and there's already texture below. So I've got some brown, some gray, some tan. So now I'm going to, if this is sort of dry down here, you can go and do your stems. If it's still wet, you'll want to wait and maybe walk away from your painting and come back to it, or use a hairdryer. So I'm going to make this barn red. I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to use this redwood from my Woodlands palette. And I've really got to watch. These are very, very wet. So if I put my hand in here, I'm going to get it on my hand and then redistribute it wherever my hand rests again. So I'm going to put this kind of rusty red-orange color just underneath. You can see how I'm leaving a little bit of the white of the paper, just making up and down strokes so that it's mimicking boards in the texture. If you go side to side, you want to make sure you're moving that paint around so that it is not visible, the strokes. So it's best to kind of lay it down in the actual direction that you want. So that's my first layer. Now I'm going to go back over here to this and darken this up. Now that it's dry, it's a little bit damp, but that's okay. I'm going to add some of these layers in here. And do the same up here. I don't want to get it too wet across here, so I want it to dry quickly so that I can do the sky in a little bit. Using a little bit of black now to kind of go back in with a fatter line than my pen, like so. And now I'm going to add this foxberry, which is a version of a red. On top of that, and just see what kind of color I get. You can always try it out on your strip of paper first. Put the first layer down, let it dry, and put the next layer on it and see if you like that color. Just kind of mixing it on the paper. You can mix the two colors together initially, but I like the fact that in some places you're going to see more of that orangey color, the burnt rust color, some places the red, and so that's a reason to do the layers on the paper. If you put it on right away and it's still wet, it's just going to basically blend together and it really won't make a difference. If I let that dry a little more, it would probably pop a little better, but I like this look, so this is fine, and for sake of time, it works. Alright, I'm liking how that's looking, and then I'm adding a little bit of gray right here along this eave to make a nice shadow, and kind of along here. It's a little damp, which is how I want it, so that it doesn't turn out to be a stark line. If it's too wet, it won't work. If it's too dry, it won't look the same. So you kind of make sure that paint is just kind of tacky type of damp. Now that's a little heavy here, so I'm going to distribute those, or I can take them off and wipe them onto my towel. Put a little shadow here, and again in here. So I will get some of this black and kind of go, this brush has seen a better day. They do last forever and ever and ever, but because I use them for group classes, sometimes they get a little more frayed. When you're new to watercolor, sometimes you tend to overwork the brush. And I'm going to pull some of that wetness back. I got that nice shadow there. And now I'm going to put some more detail into my grasses. Just gonna come in here. And I don't want to go all the way out to the line because I'm going to do that sky. There we go, some details. So now I'm going to work on the flowers, then I'll get to my sky. So in this one, I'm choosing to use this purpley color. It was this one and this is a blue and kind of bluish and reddish together. Made this kind of plum color. Probably would never see a flower in person this color, but I've done this painting several times with this red. It looks really pretty, a little bit of orange, but I want to change it up. Sometimes you get tired of doing the same thing over and over again, so you can take the same drawing and make it all new by changing up the color, texture, and choices. You can even use a pencil and add some things. You could add a little dog in here if you wanted. I think I'm gonna take a little bit of yellow and put that, maybe I'll do this one in yellow. And now I'll make sure I get a few other places of yellow so that it doesn't become some kind of a focal point. Let me get back in the camera view here. Let's see. Get like a little bit more of that color, maybe a little different shade so that this one pops a bit more. Put that same shade, now that I've made a new one, sort of over here to mix it in. And I'll put that here. Dabbing, that pigment kind of pulls at the end of the brush, so I'm just dabbing that in there. And let's try this. A little bit of a raspberry, purpley red. Kind of moving my brush around so that I have white of the paper there. I can always come back in and fill that in. Do this one that same color and pop a couple other little places. Maybe I'll go over this green one a little with that. Kind of looks brown, which is okay too. And maybe down here. Whoop. Get that out of view. There, that's pretty fun. And I can go in and kind of add a few more layers here, or as I was saying, if you've got this white and you clear your brush after this is done, you can just kind of go over. I've got a little yellow in there still, which is fine, but just close the gap so that it's not bright white, but it is a different tone than the rest of that flower, leaving the texture just very lightly going over there and pulling the pigment together. Oop, I lost a little flower here. Okay. Now I'm going to come in here and make this a little darker. I'd taken that color back earlier, but now I think it will be good to be darker. Very loose and sketchy, and then here I want a stem there, not drawn in, but I want to put it in there. And now I'm going to take this shadow and kind of pop this in here now that those are dry enough. And shadow is the name of the color, so it's like a black, obviously, you see that. Give a little bit of definition in a few places there. Can add that around the door. Didn't mean for it to be quite that rough looking, but it actually works with this drawing. Put that across here and maybe a little bit more on that eave. And I'll put a little bit in here. Make it a little more saturated. We're going to do like we did down here, where you're filling this with water. Be very careful around that deep red or whatever color you did your barn or the roof, because it'll just bleed into your water here. We're squeezing some water around. You can do the whole space because it's pretty small. And then I'm using this blue here. I'm trying it back the other way, just kind of depositing a few. Make sure to get near here, and I do want to make sure to get right as close as I can to this barn, just to make sure that it isn't obvious that I did them in two parts. I want those clouds to look like they're behind the barn. So I will now kind of move that pigment around, leaving heavier spots and lighter spots. You can do it solid light blue. You could leave it white if you want. Now see this, I don't want to leave, I'm very, very careful. I don't want to leave any white around that barn. And for sky, you want to go side to side so that it looks like a real sky along the horizon. Maybe I'll put a little bit here. Clean my brush off, move some of that pigment around.